Of course, the other thing going on this week, and apparently kicking into gear later on today, is Hurricane Sandy, which is supposed to combine with some snowstorm coming in from the west and wreak havoc quite badly on the East Coast for something like 800 miles.
Yeah.
Crazy.
One of the biggest storms that anyone has ever seen, and enough to shut down all the transit in New York and evacuate lower Manhattan.
Nuts.
It really looks serious, and it's weird because it's taking this straight left turn. Usually hurricanes, they come up and they kind of float out into the ocean. Supposedly this one's going to turn left and just batter the Northeast.
There's a system off of Greenland or something that's keeping it tracking toward New York and the coast. Otherwise, it would just shoot off into the sea. And this is kind of weird because it'll be the second consecutive year New York has had a hurricane. Hey, isn't that bizarre?
Yeah.
Remember the one last year? I mean, it petered out a little bit at the end, but it was still huge.
Yeah,
it was
a bunch of trees down in my yard and took out power lines and it was pretty serious.
Power was off in some areas for a long time.
And it's odd because we just moved from the Northeast, which never really has hurricanes, to Texas, which seems to have them a lot. And now it's the Northeast getting hit with this major storm.
Well, if you think about this hurricane season, there's been nothing, has there? I mean, I guess there was that when the Republican convention was going on in Tampa, there was supposedly, but it didn't amount to much. Or did it? Am I remembering that incorrectly, or was it a huge deal? It didn't seem like it was.
It didn't wind up hitting anywhere near the convention, I think. So that was kind of took it out of the news. But I think it did some damage to the islands and stuff. But which I mean, if you're in one of those islands, you're in Haiti or the Dominican Republic, or poor people just get nailed by those things over and over and over and over again. It really is awful. But this one, it looks serious.
Yeah, in New York, this is a big problem. There's just a city where you're trapped anyway, and then you've got all the tunnels, you have the bridges, you have everything shut off. Probably, I guess they're going to close the tunnels on a case by case basis later on tonight, and they're going to close the transit system, and it's just going to paralyze the city.
Yeah, and it's one of those things because usually storms, they're a tough thing to talk about for national news because if you're living in Utah, it's not going to be affecting you, and people go on and on for weeks about storms, and you're like, all right, well, I'd rather hear about something else. And there's usually that level of skepticism as well. I always have with weather reports because they always say it's going to be the 100-year storm, and it always isn't. Mm-hmm. But particularly since Katrina, government officials now show no possibility that anything else can happen except the worst tragedy because they know they can't be caught on record if something does go really wrong. They have to be making sure that everyone is as focused on the worst case scenario as possible. And it kind of goes back to what Glenn always talks about. Glenn gets mocked constantly because he says, have some food, have some water, in case something goes wrong. Yet as soon as a storm like this approaches the seaboard, there's absolutely nothing in the stores. People freak out. They run and they buy 9,000 loaves of bread, and then no one can get any food. There's no batteries anywhere. None of the basics are available in the stores. And all you have to do is, instead of mocking people like Glenn when they say, hey, have some food storage, have the basics available in case of a natural disaster or terrorist attack or something like that, you could just do that stuff. You could still mock them if you want. But how about doing it at the same time so that this stuff doesn't happen?
Yeah, what a bad idea to have food storage in case of something like this, that you can't get food for 10 days. Or what about a generator? Brother. Some backup gasoline for the generator. Oh, that's just silliness. When you're out of power for 10 days, you'll wish you'd had a generator.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I mean, again, I keep going back to Hurricane Rita when the whole city was evacuated. And then Rita didn't really even hit Houston when I lived there. But everything was evacuated and everything dried up. Just the threat of the storm screwed up that area for 2 weeks. And it was so surreal and bizarre because all stores were closed, all banks were closed, all ATM machines empty. You couldn't get gas because the gas station's closed.
Yeah, ATMs are is a good one to bring up too, because people think, all right, I can always get cash and I can go buy stuff. You can't even if there is stuff in the stores, you can't purchase it in some situations, because once if power goes out or the credit card systems go down for a couple days, you're screwed.
Yeah,
and there's different levels of preparedness here. You've got the Glenn Beck level, which I would say you're probably at least near the Glenn Beck level.
Closer to that.
Where you're really prepared for almost anything that can happen that you can possibly prepare for. I mean, you can't prepare for the show Revolution on NBC where the power goes out forever.
Right.
You can't prepare for that. But you can prepare for, a significant, maybe being out of work even for a few months. You're prepared for that. I'm prepared in that way of for something like this where, food, water, basics for a couple of weeks if you were to lose electricity or something. I'm probably prepared in that range. But Manhattan is totally different. I mean, I have a lot of friends who live in Manhattan. They don't even think about not having access to everything instantly. It's not even a consideration. They don't even have tissues for tomorrow. These guys, they're on their way home, walking from an office to their apartment. They stop at CVS and buy their groceries, or Duane Reade, which is another one of the CVS type store. It's they have the very, very basics, and that's it. They have their apartments are 170 square feet. There's no storage at all. If this thing gets wiped out as far as power and access to goods for a couple of weeks, these people are completely screwed.
And it affects the election. That's why it affects the rest of the country, because it seriously impacts the election. If New York City is out of power for 2 weeks, what does that mean for next week? What does that mean for voting? What if you can't get to the polls? What if you can't vote? What if there's a lot of scenarios that could play out that are really ugly.
Yeah.
I really hope and pray it doesn't happen, but if it does, I don't know what it does to the election.
Yeah, I don't know either. And they have to have, I guess, some sort of backup plan.
Well, the Constitution says that you just have to, I can't remember the exact wording, but it's something like you call for election in a timely manner or whatever, meaning that, at least the way I interpreted it, because I looked for something. What happens if you can't vote the day of? Can you do it another time? And it seems like you can.
Wow, can you imagine that?
But I can't imagine that, and I've never seen it happen.
And a lot of election experts are saying that if New York City can't vote, Barack Obama might only win by 60 points the state of New York, and that would be. You want to talk about a tragic? That would be tragic. Tragedy. I don't even know what to do on that.
All hell breaks loose at that point.
He only would win 70-10, with everyone else just saying, "Nah, I'd rather not."
Now, if you can get the whole state not to vote, you might be onto something. You might be onto something. But obviously, they can't let that stand. If New Yorkers can't go out and vote,
have to be able to.
The rest of the country is not going to just say, "Okay."
No, they deserve their right to vote.
They've got
obviously.
to vote.
Yes.
Much as we don't want them to, they've got to vote.
Absolutely.
So it'll be interesting to see. And, I guess you keep your fingers crossed and pray that this thing won't be as bad as everybody's expecting. Because if power is out for 10 days in New York City and the whole state, and then it's not just New York City either, it's an 800-mile radius.
Now, it affects Pennsylvania, which is certainly a swing state among
even
others.
Down to D.C., right?
Yeah.
It's serious. And it's something we really, at least in my recollection, haven't faced. So keep your fingers crossed. Pat and